Hello and welcome to Interaction Design Module 2 Tutorial 5. What are we going to be doing today? So we're still working on P5 speech form storming, and each tutorial we've already mentioned is going to be experimenting with a specific way that P5 explores speech. This tutorial is going to be exploring how to convert voice to text with P5, and this is going to allow speech to control an outcome, right? Let's take a look at the code this week. I'm going to have a fresh window here in Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to drag the speech to text folder directly in. You can see that we do have 7 different sketches. So they're really some of them are really not different from the other one. They're just small changes. Some of them have experimental features for you guys to try to, go back and forth between different things. Let's take a quick look, maybe starting with the index first, and then we'll move a browser in. So you can see again, using that sort of same iOS stuff that'll help there. You can see that we have a couple features from our style. You can see that we have some of the style right here, our body and our canvas. There is a style CSS, which we will take a look at in a second because we are going to be actually using it here. And if we scroll down, you can see that I have the style sheet commented out, right? You can also see that I have an actual font that is connected directly, right, as a style sheet. And you can see that it's from a URL. You can also see in this one we're running the same sort of 3. Maybe I'll just stretch this out a tiny bit more. Whoops. If it'll let me. For some reason it doesn't want to. Oh, from there, sorry, okay. So you can see we have our p5.min, we have our p5.dom.min, we have p5sound.min, and we have p5speech.js. We're also, if you notice, we're running ml5.min. This has to do with recognition, even speech recognition. So part of what we're going to be looking at today is actually having a computer, well, maybe not translate, but certainly, well, I guess if you're translating speech to text, it needs to have some kind of understanding of the words themselves. You can see starting off with the sketch.js. Down here you can see that I've commented out a couple of basically just some text that doesn't really matter to this. Again, the origins from this code came from some coding train tutorials. They're quite different by the time I end up going through and playing with them all, but that is where they originally came from. So let's look at the style. Not too much here. You can see that we really just have repetition of those two, the body and the canvas, but you do see that there is also this speech class, okay? Not even sure. Hottenschwaller font, its impact, it's Arial, narrow, bold, sans serif. All right, and it has, you can see the colors blue, violet, and it's in a font display block. Okay, let's take a look at Sketch 1, and I'm going to also pull up the browser. You can see that in the background I have the P5 libraries there. I'm just going to go to a basic browser window. So in our sketch.js, you can see right here, Daniel Schiffman right at the top. This GitHub usually is not for the specific piece of code. It may be just generally, but it's there in case you wanted to look things up further. This sketch outputs the text from the P5 to the HTML DOM. So let's take a look at it. So we have our let on, let start button, and let mic. So what could those 3 things be based on the idea that variables are just names on how we use them. So let on is actually going to be using the button in the window. And we've seen these, in fact. So the let on, let start button, the let mic have come over directly from the microphone sketch from last week, from last tutorial. And I really am. I'm porting things over using the same variable names so that you guys can sort of get used to how you can reuse stuff in your code that way. In the setup, you can see we're using arrow functions. Right now there's no canvas because we're running this right out of the DOM element itself. Speech rec is the name of it. And again, it's funny how, and I went through this the last time, that I didn't, there's no let. It's interesting that it's just going right into, so speech rec equals new P5 speech rec. We are using the English US, recognition object, right? And it is using the callback, the got speech callback. And if we kind of glance down here, we can see there is a function got speech. And we will talk about why that's function got speech and not a specific arrow function. If I didn't mention that last week, I think I did. In a different way, we'll talk about it though today. So let continuous equals true. So what's going on here? This is continuous recognition, and what that means is it's going to keep listening and recognizing as opposed to one time only. So if you have this just happen once, it basically executes once, and it is in the setup, so it's only going to happen the one time, right? So this allows continuous recognition to be true. Let interim results equals false. So if you want to try partial recognition, because it's faster, you would want interim results to be true. And in fact, we're going to play with that because true is a lot of fun in this case. But here it's going to be false because what it's really going to do is recognize, and it's going to put up the full amount of what it thinks it is, as opposed to the guesses that it does in the interim before it executes its full guess at what it thinks you're saying. Then the speech rec.start, so it's starting the speech rec object, and it's running the continuous and interim results. So whatever you have here, it's running them there, right? Those are the parameters. Let output equals select speech. So in this case, what it's doing is whatever the output that's coming out of the whole speech recognition, it's turning that into a variable we're calling output, and that output is going to select this speech. And you know what that is? That's the class speech that we talked about. If we come back over here, you can see that in fact that's this object. So whatever this text is going to be reflective of what the output is from this select speech. And you can see that on is being set to false, and this on and all the way down here, this is exactly the same button as before with the same yellow border. All of that styling can be affected here. So what I wanted to do is show you that in fact we have text that's running in the DOM that's being controlled through the style. We also have a button that's controlled by P5 and styled in P5. There are lots of different ways to do this, and I'm giving you guys all of this not so that you keep the button the way it is, so that you can see that you can go in and style it in P5 itself. So please go in and change the button. I will know if you didn't, right? So the button is also meant to be ugly because it's meant for you to change it. So you can see that in the comments here, speech recognized event. So this is that function got speech. And here's what I want you to notice. We're still in the setup, right? And this is really what's important, is we're in this arrow function setup. You will find that methods, so if you remember that a method is a function inside of another function, methods don't work when they're arrow functions. An error will come up if I turn this into an arrow function. So it's running as a normal function, even though really it's what we would call a method, right? And I've got that, in fact, even in the comments, it's saying that very specifically. This method checks to hear if something is there. So it's listening for voice. So it needs to have access to your microphone. And then once there is microphone, it's checking to hear if something is there. It transcribes the sound as text. and then it saves that value of what it thinks it is as a string. So remember that a string is going to be data that's characters, right? So it's going to save the value as a string. Then it's, in this case, going to open the console.log. It's going to open the console, and in the browser, you can see that it's at work. So this is console.log speech.rec, if speech.rec .result value. So if there's an if statement here, if this has a result value, right, which means that if there is true a result value, then let this said variable equals speech.rec equals result string. That is the result string that is going to be made of its best guess, and it's going to run that result string as a string. Output, and here's sort of the secret sauce of what is going to happen in the DOM. That's that output, right? So if you remember up here, we have let output equals select speech, and down here you can see that output.html said. So the output is going to be whatever this let variable is. And you can see that that's running on the inside of the if statement. And then we have our turn on, which is really just turning on the microphone. You can see there's no FFT. It's not analyzing the results, but it's turning on the microphone. You still need some kind of a gesture to do that. Now, you are going to find that some of the sketches specifically have the microphone on button, and some of them do not. And some of them, in particular when I uploaded them to my server, did not work until I did put the microphone on, and other ones seemed to work regardless. Now, that could have been because I was testing them all at once and I had given permission already, in which case it will be up to you, any of them that don't work, to go in and add the microphone. And I would say a big part of the form storming this week is getting used to that process of using the code, right? So the code is still all provided. You may need to add buttons to things. Now, it could also be if you test them in different browsers, if you test them in different devices. I encourage you to try it on your phone, right, when it's uploaded to your server. You may find it may not work in your server, or sorry, it may not work on your device, even though it's on your server and you can use it through the web, unless you have the microphone, that button, on your device. So you may need to go and add it regardless. That is kind of your exploration as part of your form storming. Let's execute this and let's see what happens. So I'm going to just dial that back. We are at the sketch.js. Let's go live and see what happens here. So the microphone has popped up. I'm going to click it and let's see what happens. So at first it may look like nothing is happening. So let's go to the console and let's see. Is it able to read what we're saying? It looks like it's still kind of starting up, and there it is. It takes a little bit of time because it's not doing interim results. So it is listening to what we're saying. There we go. So you can see that it's taking the words that I'm saying and it is trying to transcribe them, and it's turning them into this text that's in the DOM. Now, one way to make sure it's in the DOM, you might be saying, well, it's everything is white. You can see that there's no draw function here, so let's just create a draw. And we'll put a background of red. Oops. There's no canvas, so let me I'm just going to go in here for a second and let's add a canvas. Oh, and you know what, actually I'm just going to come in here, create canvas. Let's just grab this canvas, come back to here, let's okay, there we go. So now we have our red canvas, which will allow you then to see. Let's restart that. Now it's going to take a little bit of time, and there you go. And so you can see that the DOM element is different than the actual background element. Okay. Let me just adjust this a tiny bit. It's better. Okay, there. And you can see that it's pretty accurate. Like, it's going to depend on your microphone. It's going to depend on how clearly you try to enunciate or pronunciate things. But nonetheless, it's going to do its best. Okay? And it could make a difference very much on which speech rec object you're using. And in fact, we have so many amazing international students that might be a great place to go and to start experimenting, because if English is not your first language, then it'll be very interesting to see how you can go in and play with that feature in particular. Think about the last tutorial and how you could go in and actually, get some type of specific dialect synthesis. Now, this is just converting it to text. It's not saying it out loud. We will be doing that, but not until the sort of week 7, the next activities, right? But not this week. So let's go to, oh, you know what? So that was still in Sketch. Sorry, guys, just 1 second. Let me just take a look here. Yes, that was running in... Wait a minute. That's not running Sketch 1. Let's run Sketch 1. Oh, Sketch 1 is running gray. Okay, and you can see that, in fact, Sketch 1 is running a little bit differently. Where did I add that then? Did we add that? No, we did add that in Sketch. Good. I thought I was I'm getting ahead of myself, and in fact, I wasn't. We've moved to the next one. So let's close the canvas. And you can see that immediately there's quite a big difference here, right? You can see how quickly that it's responding to things, and it's no longer in the DOM element. So let's take a look at that. So this sketch uses a locally accessed font asset and outputs to the canvas. So that's a few specific things. So let's see. We have our let speech object. We have a let set object, or variables. We have our setup. We have our create canvas. Now you can see that this is actually that font that's being loaded. And if you look at it, it's called inconsolata, right? Equals load font. And in fact, probably could have done a let inconsolata there. Why didn't I do that? Whoops. Let inconsolata. And you can see that there's something good about having the background just shift from white, just so you can kind of see things are working, even while you're debugging. And you can see how quickly that's responding to what I'm saying. It's pretty wild, even when it's wrong. So one thing I didn't point out when we were talking about the folder this week, of course, in assets, you can see there is actually so it's running this open type font that's loaded in there, and that's cool to see that P5 can load in and it can load true type fonts as well. This way you can control it, and that's what I really wanted to show you here, was in fact that yes, you could run it in the DOM, and yes, you could have that connected through a URL, or you can have an asset folder and you can load it right in your setup, right? So you can see here that the text font is setting it to inconsolata. The rest of this is pretty much the same, except interim result equals true, right? So this is running live, just fully all the time. Now, it may stall out while we're working with it, because you can imagine that it is actually creating a huge string object. And what, part of your experimentation is going to be playing with that, because I've seen it stall out. I know it stalls out, and it's hard to say whether it stalls out because it gets so overwhelmed with a string, or whether it just, when there's a pause long enough, that it stops and it will stop listening. And I did find some solutions to that. I haven't really found that they worked as well as I would like, though. So a lot of people have ideas on it, and I could, be glad to share those with you, but I'm not using them here. Somewhere in the code that it might be there. It hasn't really been effective for me. So you can see that we're running in the draw. We have our background running 220, so it's gray, which is good since the text is red. Running the got speech object, got speech function. It's calling it in the draw, and then you can see that here's the got speech function, and it's console logging that speech rec variable, and it's pretty much, it's very, I'm trying to think if it's similar. It's almost the same. What's different is that in the if statement, we are actually giving it those sort of style choices of the text. So you can see we have text size set to 30. So if we set that to 50, you can see that it gets bigger, right? So you can play with that. You can see that the fill is set to red. You can play with that. Then you can change the fill. I don't know if you can, it'd be interesting to see if you could add a stroke to it and play with the stroke. You can see that text align is set to center, which would be also interesting to see whether or not it makes a difference in how reading the text makes sense. Does it make sense better if it's the left, right, center, the way it's aligned? This is running right at the center. I encourage you to experiment with that. And you can see that the actual text is taking the said variable, right, which is the string, and it's putting it width to width, width divided by 2, height divided by 2, which is right in the center here, right? It is interesting that it is running it width divided by 2, not display width, not window width, but width divided by 2, height divided by 2. That is something to pay attention to, because some objects, it seems to matter more than others how you do handle that. And then you can see that the sed equals null, and that is specifically done so that it's basically cleaning this in such a way that it's not being overwhelmed by that string. So it could be that and it's doing this every time it's being called in draw. So as long as it's happening, every time it goes through this loop and takes this string, it then sets it to 0, sets it to nothing. So that's interesting. But overall, that's really what this one is about, is just looking at how you can go in and play with that stuff. In particular, oh, and there it goes. You can see that it's, oh no, it's still loading. I thought that was maybe it stalling out. Let's bring in this background. I left that in there. You can see that it's still 220, but it's running, so 22010, what does that mean? If you only have two numbers here, the one number is always going to be grayscale, right? The second number is going to be alpha. So this alpha sets the alpha down to a 10 out of 255. So it's means that it's going to be transparent and layer over itself over and over again. So what happens if we run that? So now you can see that there's this interesting effect going on of like text blurring over itself. But eventually it does kind of come to the forefront, right? But it leaves that sort of like blur in the background. Anyway, that is the kind of playfulness you are expected to do in your form storming. Don't just take it, test it, see that it works. You need to start looking for the points of curiosity that you can go in and start digging in and making it your own. All right? Save that. Let's go to the index. Let's bring up Sketch 2. Okay, so Sketch 2, and it's still running in that background. That's interesting that that's running before the click even happens, right? So that is exactly the kind of thing I want to be able to show you guys here, that some things are going to start happening. Now, what happens when we do click it? Does anything specific change? Anything changing? No, one of them does add another element to it. I find that very curious. Let's reset that. No, it's resetting without it. Absolutely resetting without it. So that's really what this one is adding, though. You can see that everything else is pretty much the same. This is just showing you guys a reference for the text align styling. Everything else is the same. It's adding the button, and yeah, I don't see any other change in the code. So what I would like you to test with that is the difference between those two in your browser. So I basically have one that's running with a microphone click and one that isn't. So pull that into the browser. Like, so when I say that, sorry, upload it to your server, right? So test it in your server to see if there's actually a difference. And here, running it in Visual Studio Code, yeah, it triggered it. But if it won't trigger it on the server, then it's not actually working, right? So that would be the way you would go in and debug that. That's the kind of thing that will make it very clear that there is a big difference between text editing, server loading, right, versus live testing. Next, we will go to Sketch 3. And with sketch 3, what do we have? So we have our let speech object, our let sed object, our let output object. So all that's there. You can see it's running immediately, and you know what? You can already see what's going on. In this one, just to kind of show you the difference, it is running interim results are true, let continuous is true. It's running both in the DOM and in the canvas simultaneously. And this is just showing you the power of both of these and how you can control how that is going to work in different elements of your HTML, right? Whether it's the canvas or the DOM, because you can access them differently for different purposes then. It's pretty cool. The output is still set to speech, but it's also set to the same, where's the text object? The text object. So we have the text object, right? And we also have the output. So both of those are sending the sed, right, value, the sed value, which is from result string, which is from result value, which is put together as a, and it doesn't actually say it's a string, but it is a string. So it's a set of characters, right? And you can see it's pretty robust. It's like running pretty well, although it keeps getting things wrong. And you know what? I find that actually one of the most interesting things about this is how much it gets wrong, how much it gets right. Okay. Next, you can see that's how quickly we're going to be able to go through some of this. So let's look at sketch 4. And one of these is going to start relying on the style sheet. Might be this one. Text font equals. Is it relying on the style sheet? This sketch uses the speech.text functionality to change the background color. Oh, this is just the background color. No, this one doesn't use the style sheet, but this one's pretty cool. And it may have been one of the last ones that used it. Anyway, you know what? I'm going to ignore that for now because one of them does, and you can actually, and what I'll do towards the end is maybe go in and just pop it open and take a quick look. So you might ask yourself at this stage, what does this one do? So we have our, we really don't have much here, do we? Like our let is just let speech. Our setup has our create canvas, display width, display height. We have our background set to white, which I'm not, again, I'm not huge on that. Let's actually, let's change that to red because then we know, oh, that's why. Of course it won't work. So, sorry, I need to go back. We need that to be that because if I want that to be red, I have to say red and it'll change the actual background because I might decide, you know what, maybe I want blue. And it will change it to blue. So you can see that the fill is set to 25. And that's interesting. I'm just going to, for a second, I don't think that matters. Red, blue. I have a feeling that's a typo. Red, blue. Oh, it's the, oh, I see. It's the color, oh, I'm sorry. It's the color of the text. So right now the fill is set to white, right? So in fact, you wouldn't even see it when I first run it unless I say blue. And then there it is, right? So I'm sorry, I mistook what was going on there. So that was set to 25 because then it's going to be like a dark, almost black color. That's all. Text size is set to 48, text to line. So these are all in this setup. It's just putting them all here. And you can see that it's running the text font is this. And is that the Avenir? What do we have in here? That's the Arial bold or Arial bold. That's the inconsolate. Let me open up this style sheet here and just see what changes, if anything. I don't see anything changing on this one. I'm going to leave that open for now, and I will close it before I finish it up in case anything changes on any of the other ones. So let me see. What do we have? What else? We have our speech object set to interim, true, false. You can see I've just sort of rearranged things a bit there. Speech.start. Now, okay, this is a specific one. We have a const. So this is also just a type of variable. A const is a variable that can't be changed in the code. It stays that, right? And it's using colors. Now, colors is in the actual library, and it is an array here, right? So it's creating colors as an array. So you might be wondering, how does it know what blue is? And that's because it knows what blue is, because blue is in the colors, right? It's already set in the colors. And so the array of them is, it knows a lot of colors. So, you know, it knows pink. It knows orange. It knows yellow, purple, right? So it can pick from a whole bunch of different colors that are in this array, but it doesn't have to name them, doesn't have to list them. It's already in the library. And then you can see now this is actually a very cool little function right here. This is parse result. And what parse result is doing is specifically it's taking that if speech.result value, and let me just open this up a little bit so we can look at it. You can see I've got like a bit of comments here. This function is looking for individual words. It selects the last one in a sentence and interprets the result. So, and you might have seen that when I had said other words started to become the thing that it was throwing in that string. So you can see that what it's doing is it's actually splitting the result string, right? It's putting that into a, it puts whatever that is into a quote, like into a string. I'm not sure about the pop there. It certainly is, there's not a push and a pop. But you can see that it's converting it to uppercase. That's interesting. That's some weird text going on inside there. So the resulting value is converted to uppercase. Let's make that legible. The background is set to color. So it's basically, and this is where it's taking, so that const color, right, equals whatever that last word is. So it's taking that last word, it's turning that into a variable called color. The value from that variable is whatever the last thing that it recognizes is. So when I keep saying a color, it's basically putting it as the background. And then I'm also using text. And so the text is converting it to actual text. So this isn't the color of the text. This is what the word is, right? So it's not just changing, think about it, it's not just changing the background color to be the color, it's changing the actual word to also say the color, and it's putting that at the width divided by 2, height divided by 2. So right in the middle. It's also console logging the color. So if we kind of scale that back a bit, you can see that that's there. So if I go purple, right? And if we inspect it and we pull out the console log, you can see that it keeps saying the thing that I'm saying. Orange. There it is, okay? And so hopefully that explains how that works. I'm gonna close that one. Let's go to the index. I think that one was 4. I'm not sure. Oh, I remember what we changed in 5. 5 is playful. And that's where I want you to go with this, right? Like there's different ways you can play with this idea. So again, here it's blank, right? And which is something that I had already said I didn't want to do. However, in this case, what I've done is I've taken exactly the same logic, and look how scaled down this is. There's not much here. Exact same logic, using the exact same, colors array, parsing results the same, but this time instead of putting it into a text field, instead of putting this into a background, it's being put into an ellipse. So what happens if we go purple? There's a purple ellipse. Orange. Red. So this is showing how you can take the color and apply it to a specific object. And this is kind of getting to maybe the playful power of what this can do in P5 that might be different than what you might do in another kind of web app, right? In P5, it's about this sort of visual presence. So how do you use this speech analysis, this ability to then transpose the speech, transcribe the speech, turn that into text, turn that into a command. So in this case, we're turning it into a command, and we can change the color to blue. Love it. Okay, let's look at our sketch 6. Now in this case, I've thrown that microphone access back up. Let's take a look at 6, see what's going on here for a second. We have our, and again, you recognize those. That is the start button, right? That's what we need for it. We do have this sound let classifier, and that's a bit of a, and that's again just the name of a variable. We're just calling it that, right? And then let square. So we will use this variable to be one square object from the square class. Now, again, it's a name. It doesn't actually mean square unless we assign a shape to it. Right now, it's just the word square. We have a preload in this case, and this is interesting. Const, so you know that it's not going to change, and it's options. And I'm not sure. And if we might be able to click on it and see more about it. Will it pull up references? I don't think it is. So options, I'm not 100% sure, but I can tell a little bit from looking at here what it's doing is it's setting this probability threshold, and it's setting it to a value. So what this is saying is that, and you know what, maybe I'll just we'll look at the whole preload for a second. Sound classifier, right? So we have our sound classifier, our variable, right? That is basically an object, but sound classifier equals. And you can see it's using that ML5. This is the first piece of code that is using the ML5 that we have loaded here in our HTML, all right? So in that ML5, it's turning this into an ML5 object. So sound classifier equals ML5.sound classifier speech commands 18W, and that's a string that's attached to some specific command, and it's running options. So it's running this, right? This probability threshold is what it's putting here. I can tell you what this is, right? Probability threshold is ML5 is the machine learning, so it's the computer, and this is going to be guessing the word that you're saying at a much higher level. So ML5 library is doing this in a way beyond what P5 speech can necessarily do, and we're setting a threshold of it has to be 95% accurate as to whether it thinks it's right. Not 100%, but close. In our create canvas, we have our usual like display width, display height, and you can see that we are creating this square. Now this square is going to be a square object that is a new object from our square class. So if I can't remember if we talked too much, hopefully in your other classes you've talked about having a like a template, or having if you create a class, you would then create objects from the class, right? So we might describe in the square class how to make a square, right? But that doesn't make a square, it just gives us the blueprint for making a square. This square is the object using this class as a blueprint. We then have our sound classifier, which is the preload, that is .classify got command. The got command, that might be further down. I don't see a reference to it just right here, but you can kind of infer that it's classifying whatever the output of this got command is. This is our button, which is right now set to false, and you can see it's still working, right? Like in the background, nothing's listening to us. That's the turn on. Now, here we go. Here's our got command. So when we had our got command function that's being called, here it is. Here it's outside. Let me make sure, 100%. The setup goes to there. The turn on goes to there. And there is a draw function underneath it. So this got command function, you can see that we have a couple parameters. There's an error and there's results. So if it gets an error, it's going to, if error, console the error, which is important. The results, you can see that it's going to do something with those. So in this case, it is console logging the results, but it's also turning them into an array. And you can see that as part of that array, results, and it numbers it, .label, so it's creating a some kind of a classification, text classification. It's also results.confidence, so it'll tell you what is the confidence, right, of this threshold, okay? And then if you take a look at it, this will give you a bit of a hint of what we're doing. Square dot move up, and it's turned that into its own little function, right? So if results equal down, if results equal up, square dot move up. If results equal down, square dot move down. If results equal left, square dot move left. And again, if results equal right, square dot move right. We have our draw, which you can see that we have our if on. So it's basically checking if, so that's on equals true. Oh, you know what? That is the whole on right there. Sorry, let me just take one quick look here. Mouse pressed equals turn on, which is this one, and it sets on to true. So we start off with true as false. When we have mouse pressed, it sets on to true. And in our draw, if on equals true, then set background to 220. So it's going to change the background to a fairly light gray. And square dot draw. So it's going to then start running this function that is part of the square. In this case, it's a square object, but that's actually referring to the square class, right? Here's the square class. So you can see we have class square. We have our constructor, and in our constructor, we're giving it sort of some all of the instructions of what we're going to be looking for. So this dot x means, of course, square, whichever object it is, but this dot x equals width divided by 2. This dot x equals height divided by 2. It's going to start in the middle of the screen. All right. We can change those things, and that's the point, right? We then have this draw function that's inside our square class, which you can see that it's defining what that square object is going to look like. So fill equals 255,00, which means that in this case, the object should be red. So it should be a red square, no stroke around it. You could, but we're not. And then you can see that it's a rectangle. So this is the first time anything has said what the object is going to be. It's going to be a rectangle, and you can see that it's the position of the rectangle is going to start off at this dot. Oh, it's always going to be this dot, but specifically it'll start off at this until that variable changes. And you can see the size is going to be 40, 40. It's not going to be very big. Inside that, we then have these four functions. We have a move left function, which says take the this dot x and minus 10, right? Or move this dot right plus 10, right? This dot x. Then we have this dot y minus 10 and this dot y plus 10. And with those, we should be able to, from me describing that to you, we should have a background that's light gray with a red rectangle in the center, small one that's 40 by 40, that when we give it instructions based on it's not even parsing. This one doesn't do any of that anymore, right? It's kind of running that on its own. Let me make sure. Yeah, no, that's all the code, right? So it's going to take those results, make a guess. It's going to convert that guess into a word. It's going to use that word to decide whether or not we're giving instructions, and it's going to respond to the words up, down, left, or right. Let's see how that works. There's our gray background. There's our square. You can see, though, it's kind of squished. And that's that squishing thing that's going on in the canvas window, where the more I truncate this down, the more it seems to be like that. So I'm just going to open it like this for a second. And let's give it a command. Up, 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 left, 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 right, down, down, down. So what are some fun things that you could possibly do with that? Well, you could certainly turn that into a, let me see, if we go to our draw, just for like one quick little thing, just to show you how easy it is to go in and play with that in some way. If I go into the draw here, preload, let's take that and let's just give it a gray background. Oh, actually, sorry, we could just put that, no, because then it'll do it every time. Let's put it in the startup. So now we get our gray immediately. If I go up, 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 left, 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 down, 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 left, 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 left. So what's happening here is I'm not refreshing the draw, right? So, or I'm not refreshing the background in draw. So I've basically created a drawing tool that responds to voice. So when we talk about accessibility, it could use some more fun to be more robust. There's no doubt about that. However, it is very specific in how it's now responding purely to voice and able to make guesses. Now, what we aren't looking at, let's look at that inspect for a second and get maybe a bigger sense of what's going on there. So in our console, you can see that, in fact, it's listening to the words and it's taking a guess as to what the word is, right? So it's not always right, correct? Up, 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 up. And you can see it's 99%. So as long as it's over that 95% threshold, it's making a choice, right? And it's only doing something here, though, if it thinks it's hearing it. So when I say to you, right, right, you understand, right, right, right. Can't see right because it's being drawn behind it, right, 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 right. And it's able to make this guess. It's pretty cool. But again, using machine learning instead of P5 speech directly. Okay? I'm going to close the console and let's take a look at Sketch 7. And I don't think Sketch 7 is actually any different. It might just be, it's Sketch 7 is Sketch 6 without the button. So it's running it without anything. And that is, again, just part of me testing on my server as to whether or not it will work without having the gesture in the browser. So it may work here, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work in the browser. So let's give this a try. Up, up. So you can see here that it's working without the gesture. What you would need to do as part of your form storming is get it on your server, test it on your server and see how it responds. Then, you know what? Send that URL to your phone and test it on your phone and see if it works there and start getting a sense of what this debugging means. Remember that whichever sketch you're running, right, of however many you have, you're going to need to go into your index and make sure that it aligns to it. Okay? So, that's our code for this week. Next steps. Continue with your P5 speech form storming. Continue experimenting with the code, and you've seen this before. Play with the mechanical way the code works. Play with the aesthetic way the code looks. Follow your curiosity, even if it breaks the code. Save all your versions. Every time you hit that aha moment, it's going to make a difference. And please, go ahead and start form storming.